Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Essential Asatru, Walking the Path of Norse Paganism by Diana Paxson. Foreword by Isaac Bonowitz. Narrated by Anne Richardson. Foreword by Isaac Bonowitz. If you don't already know who she is, it is with the greatest of pleasure that I introduce you to Diana Paxson, a longtime friend, talented bard, skald, popular science fiction and fantasy author, and international leader in the modern Norse religious movement. Some may already have encountered her work, for she is a legend in her own time, and one of the most inspiring people I have ever known. How so? She put together the event that led to the founding of the Society for Creative Anachronism, the first medieval role-playing organization in the United States, and the first non-pagan organization in the United States to make polytheists welcome, and learned about group dynamics and organizational development by helping to turn it into an organization. The Chronicles of Westria, her classic series of fantasy novels set in a post-eco-apocalyptic California, presented an inspiring picture of a nature-respecting and deeply honor-bound culture. She worked with Marion Zimmer Bradley to found Dark Moon Circle, whose priestesses helped inspire The Mists of Avalon, and continued Bradley's work in writing the Avalon series, a major contributor to goddess-centered paganism. She also founded the Fellowship of the Spiral Path, an eclectic Meso-pagan religious group based in Berkeley, California, that serves both men and women, and developed its clergy training program. Along with other female leaders such as Freya Aswin and Prudence Priest, her work in the pagan tradition of Northern Europe, heathenism or Ásatrú, helped change the perception of this religion from a sexist and racist Meso-pagan path to one that is both spiritually and socially open and inclusionary, honoring the goddesses as well as the gods. Thanks in large part to the research and experimentation of Paxson and her students, the ancient system of Seidh, a quasi-shamanic style of oracular trance work, is being practiced in the 21st century. Just as the ancient Germanic and Scandinavian peoples were more than hairy-chested Vikings looting and pillaging their way across Europe, there was, and is, more to their religion than warrior gods such as Odin, Thor, and Tyr. Both ancient and modern followers of Ásatrú honor their ancestors, the spirits of the land, the waters, and the sky, and goddesses such as Frigg, Freya, Idun, Skadi, Nerthus, and Sif, as well as the gods. When I first thought of creating a series of books that would present the most essential information about different varieties of the modern pagan heathen religion, in a format that would make them easily comparable reference works, Diana's name was the first one that came to me as the right person to do a book on the modern Ásatrú, or heathen movement. I am delighted to say that my instincts were correct, for in this book she presents everything that a devoted explorer or a casual visitor to the 9 worlds could ask for. Here you will learn not just who the various gods and goddesses of Germany and Scandinavia were and are, but also how to honor them, your ancestors, the nature spirits, and yourself in a, not the, proper way. She explains in clear language the history of the Norse and Germanic religions and their revivals, the differences between the various factions in the modern heathen scene, how Northern European magic and divination differ from those of the other related Indo-European cultures, how to contact others who might want to walk this path with you, and how to survive a sumbel, Norse drinking rite, with your wits intact. If you are already familiar with Wicca or some other neo-pagan path, she will help you to understand the important differences and similarities between your path and Ásatrú. Her discussion of resources will connect you to some organizations, solid books, and other useful tools to help you on your way. Most important, in this book, Paxson communicates the soul of Ásatrú in a way that will stay with you long after your first of many readings. So make a fire in your fireplace, or at least light a few candles. Fix yourself a nice cup of tea or fill a horn of mead, settle down in a comfy chair, and get ready to have an exhilarating and profoundly transformative experience. Introduction. Several years ago, I was invited to give a paper on Scandinavian oracular practice at the Viking Symposium in Newfoundland. Most of the presenters were from various universities. My name tag stated that I was from the Troth. "What's that?" asked a lady as we were waiting for dinner. "A heathen religious organization," I replied. She gave me a confused look. "Isn't that a contradiction in terms?" At that point, I realized I was going to have to preface my paper by defining what I meant both by heathen and religion. Since then, I've participated in numerous discussions in which modern pagans of all flavors struggled to define themselves. So it seems wise to begin this book by defining some basic terms. Pagan religions. Just as Christianity, Judaism, and Islam can be grouped together as monotheistic Abrahamic religions that believe in a single all-powerful God, polytheistic religions that honor a multitude of deities also form religious families. Among them, we find the myriad Hindu sects, Buddhism, which is non-theistic in its theology but includes polytheistic elements in its practice, tribal traditions from the Americas and Asian, the African and Afro-diasporic faiths, which include modern Umbanda and Santeria, and European paganism. Until very recently, the possibility that a native European polytheistic faith could be a viable option would have been met with incomprehension. Today, however, a linear worldview that includes an inevitable progress toward a cataclysm decreed by a single, all-powerful God is proving dangerously attractive to some, and to the rest of us, simply dangerous. Instead of a worldview in which neither humanity nor nature have intrinsic meaning because all such meaning derives only from God, or polarizes into a conflict between absolute good and absolute evil, we need a worldview that sees holiness in everything, recognizes that spirit takes many forms, and believes that history moves in circles, not a straight line. The first European polytheistic religion to become well known in Europe and North America in the 20th century was pagan witchcraft, or Wicca, which includes a multitude of traditions derived from or inspired by survivals from European folk religion and the work of Gerald Gardner. However, Wicca is by no means the only kind of European paganism to flourish today. A second and rapidly growing branch of the family consists of the reconstructed traditions based on the practices and beliefs of specific cultures. These include the Celtic traditions, among them the different kinds of Druids, the Hellenic traditions, which draw from ancient Greece, the Kemetics, who base their practice on the religion of Egypt, Baltic traditionalists, who have revived their native religions in their newly independent nations, and the religions of the Germanic peoples in Scandinavia, on the continent, and in England. Heathen faith. Just as traditional cultures tend to call themselves the people, their religions are generally known as something like our way, if they are called anything at all. Thus, it was not until Christians began their attempt to convert the North that the Germanic peoples needed a name for their beliefs. Churchmen called the religion and its followers heathen. When scholars and romantics began to study the old ways in the 19th century, some called it the troth, or faith, of the gods, Ásatrú. Either term, or a number of others, from the Northern Way to Norse Paganism, Erminism, Fornseither, or Fornsed, Old Custom, Theodism, Germanic Reconstructionism, the elder troth or Odinism-Wotanism, although the latter may give the erroneous impression that Odin is the only god, can be used for the versions of Germanic religion that we are attempting to recover and recreate today. Until recently, the term heathen, like pagan, was taken to mean a person without religion, or at least without the civilizing influence of Christianity. The word was first recorded in the translation of the Bible into Gothic made by Ulfilas in the 4th century, where it was used to translate the term Gentile. It has been assumed that just as pagan meant the people of the pagus or countryside, heathen meant the people of the heath who continued to practice the old ways when the city folk had all converted to Christianity. This interpretation has been questioned. However, heathen is at least a term that modern English speakers can both recognize and spell, and one that, moreover, can be found in all the Germanic languages. On the other hand, it can also be used, or misunderstood, as a pejorative. As a name, the term Ásatrú has the advantage of being both distinctive and easily recognized. It is a word from Old Norse, the language in which most of the surviving Germanic religious lore was written. It also has the distinction of being the name by which the only state-supported, as opposed to legal, pagan religious organization is known. Appropriately enough, Iceland, the last country in which the Aesir, the Norse gods and goddesses, were officially worshipped, was also the first to restore official recognition of Ásatrú as a modern religion. The Ásatrúarfélagið, or Ásatrú Fellowship, was established after the faith was recognized in 1972. As of 2000, over 600 Icelanders had registered with the félagið, which receives a portion of the church tax each year. In a country with a population of around 200,000, this number is significant, and I am told that it is steadily increasing. Of course, the term Ásatrú also presents some difficulties. Just as the word man, which in the old Germanic languages was a neutral, not a masculine term, is today used for all humans as well as for males. The word Aesir can include all the deities, just the males, or only those from the clan who live in Asgard. There are also some who use Ásatrú to designate those who worship the Norse gods only, avoiding involvement with any other tradition. For example, Theidists who follow the Anglo-Saxon or continental Germanic tribal traditions generally consider themselves heathen but not Ásatrú. When I use the term by itself in this book, it will refer to the worship of all the northern deities. I will also be using the words Ásatrú and heathen more or less interchangeably. Heathen, like the word Lutheran, can be used as a noun or an adjective, as in, I am a heathen ritual. The collective term for the religion would be heathenism, and for heathens as a group, heathenry. Capitalization seems to be optional. Ásatrú can also be either a noun or an adjective, but the same term, capitalized in the singular, is used for the religion or the collective. For more than one adherent, however, we use the Norse plural, Ásatrúar. Like witches, heathens have to contend with negative stereotypes and associations from the past. The first display case in the Smithsonian Institution's Viking exhibition featured some of them, from operatic horned helmets to a helmet from the Minnesota Vikings. True, there are heathen bikers, but not all heathens ride motorcycles or even drink beer. Some prison gang members may call themselves Ásatrú, but in ordinary life, Ásatrúar are likely to be among the most law-abiding and responsible members of a community. Although some liberal watchdogs have tried to define the Thor's hammer as a hate symbol, most of those who wear it are as positive in their outlook as those witches who wear the pentagram. Looking for the lore. What did the heathens of old believe, and how did they practice their religion? No recovered pagan tradition has complete information on the practices of the past, but Ásatrú is fortunate in possessing a large body of material known as the lore, on which to draw for inspiration. Our major sources for the reconstruction of heathen religion are the poetic and prose Edda, poems and stories based on the myths that were written down in 13th century Iceland, though the stories themselves are far older. Epics such as Beowulf and other early continental literature, the sagas, multi-generational novels about the early Icelanders that include fascinating references to heathen magic and religious practice, the histories written by early medieval authors such as Snorri Sturluson, Saxo Grammaticus, Jordanes, and others about their country's recent and not-so-recent heathen pasts, and collections of folklore by Jacob Grimm and others. In addition, there have been a variety of modern historical and literary studies, to which I will be referring. Some call Ásatrú the religion with homework. If you are interested in learning more, I recommend Our Troth, which covers much of the material included here in far greater detail and provides full references to the scholarly sources. Who this book is for. This book is an introduction to heathen faith and practice. It is intended for the individual who is simply curious about Germanic religion, who may be acquainted with Wicca and would like to know what else is out there, or who has a friend or relative who has gotten involved with Ásatrú and wants to know why. If you are already a practicing heathen, you will probably find the content familiar, though some of the perspectives may be new. In a book of this size, only the most essential information could be included. Whether you are new to heathenry or an old hand, I encourage you to explore them. Essential Asatru. Prologue. Feasting the Gods at Ravenhammer Hall. Autumn has come. There's a nip in the air, and the hillsides flare with bursts of red and gold. It's a season for giving thanks and gathering in the harvest, a time to tell tales of past and present and years to come. Ravenhammer kindred is getting ready to celebrate the Winter Night's Feast in honor of the ancestors and the gods. Now, before we go any further, you need to know that Ravenhammer is an imaginary group. Those of you who have already encountered the heathen community may feel you recognize some of the people in this story, but I assure you that both the kindred and its members are fiction, but a fiction that is a collage of characteristics and practices from the many kindreds and heathens I have known. So although you will not find this group, its members, or the exact practices described here anywhere, almost everything I have to say about them exists or has existed somewhere. Let's start with the name. Although I don't know of any group called Ravenhammer, roughly 50% of heathen kindreds have raven or hammer somewhere in their name. The name of my own kindred, Hrafnar, means the ravens in Old Norse. Our closest neighbor is the Hammer of Thor kindred, led by Stefan Thorsman. The ravens are Hugin and Munin, the birds who range the world to bring information to the god Odin. The hammer is the weapon Thor uses to defend our world from the forces of destruction. So here we are at Ravenhammer Hall. Well, actually, it's a rambling ranch-style house belonging to the Gothi, priest, and Githya, priestess, Thorolf and Janet, set on a 2-acre lot at the edge of town. They bought the place because it has a recreation room large enough for 20 people to sit down. When they moved in, they carried fire around the boundaries of the property to claim it, explored the woods until they found the place where the forces of nature felt strongest, and made offerings to the spirits there. Thorolf is a vice principal in the local high school who uses a Norse name for religious activities because his region is rather conservative, and if he were known to be a heathen, he could be forced out of his job. Janet is a computer programmer and uses her birth name in the heathen community and in ordinary life. They started the kindred 5 years ago with their 2 children and a friend. Now they have 9 full members and 4 who are in training, and at every meeting someone brings a friend. It is Saturday afternoon and the house is already full. Some people got in late last night and bedded down in sleeping bags in the recreation room. Others have been arriving at intervals all day. Children are playing in the yard, assisted by 2 frenetic dogs. From the kitchen, the scent of roasting pork makes mouths water. The counters are covered with food brought by members of the kindred. Those who can't bring anything put a little cash into the cookie jar. Others set up long tables in a U shape and cover them with tablecloths the same red as the kindred banner that hangs on the wall. And people set out their feasting gear, wooden plates and bowls and decorated drinking horns. The walls are covered with hangings embroidered by Janet that portray the gods, and the mantelpiece is decorated with sheafs of wheat, gourds, and autumn flowers. As the sun dips behind the woods, Thorolf blows a summons on a cow horn. Fortunately, he used to play the trumpet, so it actually sounds like a horn. He has some friends who were visited by the local cops when neighbors who heard an amateur's painful squawkings thought those weirdos down the street were performing a satanic sacrifice. Everyone gathers in the backyard, some wearing Norse-style tunics, while for others ceremonial dress is a t-shirt with the logo of a heathen festival. Many, both men and women, wear belts with knives or swords. The kitchen door opens and Janet comes out, dressed in a blue hanging skirt, an overgarment rather like a jumper, over a white gown. Oval brooches pin the straps, and the amber necklaces she is wearing glow golden in the light of the setting sun. She holds a large drinking horn full of home-brewed mead. Her daughter, Sigrid, carries a pitcher of milk, and little Eric a platter with a small loaf of bread. The others fall in behind them as they take the path around the play area to the Vi. This is a long hollow surrounded by trees. At its end, a particularly fine ash tree shades the altar of heaped stone. In summer, the kindred often holds its ceremonies here, but whatever the reason, this is where they begin. Sigrid and Eric go to the ash tree, where a hollow between 2 roots seems to lead into the underworld. Beside it is a weathered statuette of a garden gnome. Very carefully, Eric sets the bread in the hollow, and Sigrid pours the contents of the pitcher over it. "Landwights, this is for you," says Sigrid. "Keep everything safe when it gets cold." Now the procession moves around the tree toward the spring. Halfway between them rises a small mound of earth-covered stone. Both Janet and Thorolf moved here from other states, and their family cemeteries are a long way away, but they have buried pictures of honored relatives inside the mound, and some of their kindred members have done so as well. Janet tips the horn, and mead pours onto the mound in a glistening stream. "Alfar and Disir, honored ancestors, drink deep and give us your blessings." For a few moments everyone is still, listening as a sudden wind whispers in the leaves of the ash tree, then passes through the wood beyond. A squirrel runs halfway down the trunk, sees the humans, and scurries back into the branches, chattering. "You tell him, Ratatosk," murmurs Thorolf, and everyone laughs, remembering the squirrel who carries messages up and down the world tree. Now the wind is picking up in earnest, and it is getting cold. The group hurries back to the house, eager to put the last touches on dinner so they can sit down. A whole haunch of pork is steaming on a platter. Beside it is a big bowl of barley and mushrooms with gravy, dishes of carrots and cabbage, salads and casseroles. A big chocolate cake sits to one side. Someone has put one of the Nordic Roots collections on the CD player, and feet are tapping. Thorolf thanks Holy Earth for the gift of food, and draws a Yera rune on it in blessing, and Janet takes a small plate of samples to the house spirit, who lives in a cantaloupe-sized stone set by the hearth. Presently the dogs will come in and take care of the offerings, along with anything else that's been dropped. but according to Ibn Fadlan, the Viking Age Arab trader, when the town dogs came out to eat the offerings left by the Rus traders, the Vikings rejoiced that the food had been received by the gods. So there's precedent. Table by table, people fill their plates and sit down. For a time they are too busy eating to say much, but presently plates are pushed aside and the murmur of conversation grows. Maureen's mother is in the hospital. Roderick has just lost his job. There's a scandal in another kindred, and everyone wants to know what's going on. Parents collect their offspring and take them to the children's room to play. They'll take turns supervising throughout the evening. But gradually the room grows still. It is time for the sumbel ceremony. Thorolf and Janet have moved a smaller table forward and set out the big kindred drinking horn and several bottles of beer and mead. Next to them sits a short-handled iron hammer, the big silver oath ring, a sprig of ash leaves, and the offering bowl, which was a salad bowl until Thorolf decorated it with an inscription in runes. Thorolf moves to the center of the room and faces north, raising the hammer to begin the hallowing rite created by Edred Thorson. Hammer in the north, hallow and hold this holy stead. And so we begin. Round 1. Heroes and Ancestors. Chapter 1. Before History. The First Heathens. Tonight, Janet picks up the drinking horn and turns to face the others. We have gathered here to welcome in the winter. Usually we begin our sumbel with a round for the gods and goddesses, but this feast is holy to the ancestors. I would like to propose that tonight we start by honoring our forefathers and mothers of the flesh and spirit instead. She looks around the circle, listening to the murmur of agreement, and turns back to her husband. As she holds the horn, he fills it with beer, dark as the ancestral soil and foamy as the sea. It is from a batch the kindred brewed earlier that summer, and it came out very well. Janet lifts the horn high. Holy ones, Alfar and Disir, for you this drink is poured. As many grains and many drops of water mingled to make this beer, though we are the offspring of many ancestors, we are one in spirit. I sign this horn with the rune Othala in token of our heritage. Cradling the horn in one arm, she draws the rune in the foam. Karen comes up to the table. A biology major at the nearby university, she is the newest member of the kindred, and as such has the honor of serving as Valkyrie. Carefully she carries the horn to Maureen, who is sitting at the end of the table, sets it into her hands, and steps back. Some of you know that I recently sent a DNA sample to England to be tested. Maureen looks into the horn to see if the head has subsided enough for her to actually get a sip of beer. Anyway, I got the results back last week, and I am descended from a woman who lived on the continent around 30,000 years ago. Well, probably some of the rest of you are too, she grins, so I hail you as cousins. Anyway, I'd like to raise this horn in honor of the woman the people at Oxford call Helena. I imagine her tending her fire and wondering if there will be enough food for her family, just as I am worrying now, and I thank her for having the courage to keep going. Hailsa! Carefully she drinks. Hail Helena! The others echo as she hands the horn back to Karen and sits down. How old is the old religion? Although heathens draw most of their religious practices from material written down during Anglo-Saxon and Viking times, those beliefs are based on millennia of evolving folk tradition. Archaeology identifies a succession of European cultures. However, recent genetic studies demonstrate that despite cultural changes, the population of Europe has remained remarkably stable from the Stone Age to the present day. 95% of all people of European extraction are descended from 7 women who lived between 10,000 and 45,000 years ago. Honoring the ancestors, especially the Disir, the foremothers who guarded the family line, is a core belief of Ásatrú. The Venus figures, which are our
Sample complete. Ready to continue?